Another week, another edition of Together We Write. My name is Chris Perzicki, Assistant Professor of English and Humanities at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. Together We Write is a hopefully weekly stream in which I will cover a variety of topics, typically associated with writing, whether it be professional writing or creative, well, not so much creative writing. That's not my wheelhouse, but we will be doing a lot of more digital humanities work, looking at various tools and techniques we can use for the sake of, pursuing more digital-based or digital-born research and scholarship. So we've got kind of break down these sessions into both writing and sort of a tool-based section of each stream. We'll see how it goes. If you're watching this and haven't figured it out yet, this is very much an experiment in progress. So we'll see how things go. All right. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about press releases. Press releases are a distinct form of communication that I had experience with back in the public sector and still find it to be an invaluable piece of writing for whatever walk of life, whatever your occupation is. Providing some good content to our press can help ease the burden of outreach and conducting all of that promotion on your own. So I'll go over that. I also want to, because I'm chomping at the bit to figure out how to connect my old PS1, my old PlayStation, to the computer. And I had it working for a little while, but I want to try it again because I was running into issues. Now, when I get to that point, I'll explain what sort of issues I was running into. But for the time being, I've got PlayStation over here. Unfortunately, I forgot my additional camera, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of impromptu camera work as well. All right, so let's jump into the press release. Okay. So as I mentioned, press releases are, well, before we get into this, just as a slight tangent, hope that everyone had time to vote, if not Tuesday, sometime before that. Extremely important election, and I also serve as an election inspector, so I've been involved with that process for I want to say going on 6-7 years now. And if you, I in some way, to be perfectly honest, I feel like I understand this sense of distrust in the voting process. It's very you would think, and I appreciate the perception, although I don't. I think it's I don't think it's an appropriate perception, but at least I can understand where if you did not had not participated, it can seem like a somewhat opaque process. You go in, you submit your ballot, or you go in, you fill out your ballot, and you submit it to into this. Here in Wisconsin, we insert the ballots into a box, or we might push a button on a screen, or back in the old days, some wards still, I think, have the little switch device where it punches the hole in the cards. And it's a very opaque process. We're used to when we do something, when we've taken an effort, and voting for a variety of reasons takes a lot more effort than it needs to, unfortunately. It should be fairly easy and painstaking, but I'm not going to use this format to get on that soapbox right now. But I would suggest to anyone who has any misconceptions or bad feelings or apprehensions about the voting process, I encourage anyone who thinks that to sign up as an observer. Okay, go to witness the process firsthand. If you can do so. Now, this introduces other problems I'll mention in a second, but I have worked with official election observers, both partisan, representing various parties, or just concerned citizens who want to just watch it go down, right? And regardless of party affiliation, regardless of the measure to their uh, devotion to that particular party, if you know what I mean, regardless of their purpose, every single observer has come away with a greater appreciation for the process. How, and not just the process itself, because it's fairly unremarkable, and I think that's part of it. You see people, they come in. There are volunteers. They go through all this. They do the check. They do the ID check. They walk you through the process. If I were to approach it from in an effort to improve the efficiency, I would immediately question why we have, 4 people on hand to both check IDs and give ballots. Okay. But this is exactly what's remarkable is this is a very people per a human centric process. Okay. This is powered by people. And it is those people that, yes, while they are prone to error, there are also 2, 3, sometimes 4 other individuals on site who will help correct that process. Okay, if there are any issues with a ballot, if there are any questions, there are plenty of people who can help answer those questions. There are plenty of people that we can call if there are any specific issues. And as voting has become more cumbersome and more complicated, unnecessarily, in my opinion, there is a remarkable amount of assistance that we get to address any of these questions that have been increasingly emerging. People want to vote, right? They want to know that they have a stake in what is happening and what is going on in this country, right? And so it's always remarkable the humanness of this process. Yes, there are errors, but it is also built to contain and mitigate those errors as soon as possible. Now, this is at the polling site. Unfortunately, I can't speak to what goes on when the ballots are being counted. I hope that experience this year was as smooth and as one observer put it, reinvigorating. If you ever want to see what the hubbub is about with voting, I encourage you to sign up to be an observer, or better yet, sign up to be a poll watcher or inspector, an election inspector. Right? Be a part of that process. Then you really get a sense of how significant yet fragile. It really is a very fragile, because it is a human process. It is therefore a fragile process, and it takes our involvement. But on the other side, and I admit that I came to voting as, I voted in every election that I have been legally able to since I was, 18? And that's quite a few elections at this point. But what drew me to serving as an election inspector was, I guess I would simply put a sense of duty. I wanted to be involved in some way. It was it was, that the option to be paid, even though it was a little amount, was nice for when I started doing this. I didn't have a whole lot of money, and it was an extra gig, right? But it was really that very first experience. Okay, there's a sense of community among the poll workers. If you are fortunate enough to work at a ward where people know each other already, there's definitely a strong sense of community. Some of these people have not seen each other, but for 1 or 2 times a year, and it's remarkable how much, to be there at that moment where they reconvene. It's pretty remarkable. The other part of it is just watching people vote. And again, this is a privilege um, to be able to do this. For me, it's just sort of taken for granted, and it had been for many years. But when you see people vote, when you see individuals vote, and you see the determination, like some they'll for my experience, they'll slide the paper ballot into a machine, and there is great vigilance when it comes to witnessing that ballot go in the box and making sure it's registered, right? That the screen says ballot accepted. I have seen situations where people may have blinked for whatever reason, were distracted, did not see the screen pop up that we had seen, and there's no way we can go back and reboot the system and check and confirm that there's no way of confirming that that ballot was cast other than the numbers matching up, the total number of votes and the number on the slip of paper, right? But I've also seen people vote who were alive when they and others in their communities were not even allowed to vote in this country. W- once you see that, once you witness that happening, and you see the way that this very simple, um, often taken for granted, this act takes place. There is it fills the room, right? You can't help but get caught up in that moment. It's pretty remarkable, and that's why I think a lot of us, for the volunteers and people who work the polls, that's a very common response. Those types of moments is what gets us there at 6 a.m., keeps us there until 8, 9 p.m., sometimes even later, to make sure everything is done and done correctly as best as we humanly can. So, um, regardless of your party affiliation, of your political leanings, I hope that if nothing else, and from what I've seen in the news so far, the notion that our elections are corrupt, um, or are so flawed that they are able to be manipulated by a party or an individual. Um, do I think that's possible? Absolutely. But I don't think it's happening at the polls. I think it's happening uh, in other areas before and after the elections. But again, if you doubt this sentiment that our elections are as strong and as capable of, really accomplishing something that's quite amazing, to tally the votes of an entire voting population and hold complete and accurate account and have those people, the results, as we know full well, direct this country one direction, another, or another, or another, right? If you doubt that, participate in the process. If you're able to do that objectively, then it's an experience worth having. If you want to participate as a partisan observer, it's also good. There are rules, and those rules must be abided by. Um, we have at my ward, we have very little tolerance for people who come in with an agenda. We do not like, uh, um, we do not tolerate any sort of canvassing or electioneering. We do not address any questions pertaining to conspiracies, and we have heard some wild ones at our little ward. But if you are genuinely, authentically interested in what an incredible, in seeing and witnessing what an incredible process it is, I encourage you to volunteer. I think it should be a national holiday. I think it should be something where, as citizens of the United States, we should be participating in this, in some, at least voting. I think it should be if not mandatory, compulsory, right? Anyway, all right, press releases. Let's go. All right, so press releases, what are they? So the thousands of these have been flying around the U.S. In every neighborhood, every community, every state, um, around the globe. Thousands, tens of thousands of these have been flying around the interwebs, being sent out via email, providing up to the minute details about news, events, happenings. So, that in mind, why in the world would any individual feel compelled to write a press release? Well, the great thing is that a press release is a very simple but very effective tool for getting a news source, channel outlet to do some of the publicity work that you probably don't have time to do yourself. It's also a way to encourage that channel to reach out, communicate with you, um, get more information, get more publicity, get your face on that screen, get your voice on that radio or podcast or whatever. Uh, it's a way of getting the word out. And this is really important, especially for if you're a creative practitioner. It's important to get the word out because you want to be able to, you want to do your creative work while also making a living. Okay, so you have to do a little bit of that legwork and promotion that many of us are not very comfortable with. So let's get the press to do it for us, right? If you're a business owner, um, hey, we've got a new product coming out. Hey, we're rebranding. Hey, we've got a new hire. No matter how small of an event it is, it's newsworthy. It's significant. The press is also a public record of events and happenings in our community, so use it as such, right? So press release is an incredible tool. As I tell students all the time, hey, you got a student, your student organization is doing something amazing. Make a press release, send it to our campus communications team. They'll send it out there. Who knows what bites? So, I mean, speaking of which, what's great about having the campus as a resource here is that you are able to send it to one organization, one entity here on campus, and they can distribute to that message to about 200 other outlets. So they can, I don't know who to send information to most times about events happening on campus. I just send it to them and they publicize it. All right. They know who to send it to. So a press release is incredibly valuable, but it's not often, we don't often think about it because I don't know who teaches, like what school, what discipline the press release falls under, except maybe communications and journalism. I've worked in those capacities, but I've never taught or taken a class under them. So I'm not sure how that goes down. But from my experience, when I worked for the public sector, we would write press releases to the tune of, I want to say about half a dozen a day. I mean, you crank them out, right? Any sort of project happening, any sort of announcement, event, anything that is newsworthy. Now, in the public sector, you're going to get a lot of attention regardless, unless it's really boring. But the press and public sector have I don't know if it's an explicit agreement, but there is an accordance between the two estates where, okay, we will give you our information, but you publish it as a matter of public record, right? Getting the word out is really important for public organizations like a university, right? So let's talk about press releases and why they look the way they look. What I was saying is, so we would write like half a dozen of these, and it would go through revision, and they're really tight deadlines. You want to have it as current as possible. Sometimes you pre-write the press releases and then release them when they're ready to go. So hopefully you give yourself enough time so that it's proofread. These really have to be tight. They have to be written well. They have to be written clearly. They have to be written concisely and professionally. Right? They also have to be written with a journalistic editor's eye in mind. Okay. Now, for most publications, that writing has to be very simple, right? The way I would liken it is, explaining an event to, yes, a general audience, but also someone who doesn't have the level of expertise, doesn't know the details, doesn't have the professional background of either the journalist, the editor, or whatever organization you're writing on behalf of. It has to be written very simply. Now, most of us have not had AP style journalism education, don't know the protocols. Fortunately, there are a lot of great resources out there, like the AP style guide, that can help us with that. However, I would be willing to bet that most news channels are willing to overlook a a poor use of AP style, and they would rather have that content. So, in my experience, the content I wrote was typically copy and pasted into whatever publication I was sending it to, word for word. This includes the title, the subheading if it was used, and any information, any quotations, copy and pasted with maybe a little bit of editing work. Now, again, this was the public sector, so the information was typically dry, detail oriented, and pretty straightforward. It was usually an announcement, right? That said, there were still some events that we would have, and we would make it, have all sorts of quotations and good resources and references. And I was shocked, to be honest, how often that information with minimal, but often unnoticeable, if any, editing being done. I don't know how common that is, but I typically assume that anything I write in a press release is going to be copied word for word. Is that the end goal? Absolutely not. It is what your end goal for a press release. That goal is to get them to contact you for more information. You really want say, hey, for more. There's the most important part, or one of the most important parts of a press release is that last line. For more information about this project, please call, point of contact, right? Really important, because that's what you want them to do. You want them to reach out and give you a shout, get some more information, get some quotes in your voice. Yes, you can provide quotes, but it's best if they get them from you directly. Now, we're not going to talk about press relations. We're not going to go there yet. So there are a number of different types of press release. The more popular, event announcements. Is there, a ribbon cutting, or a spoken word performance, or a new business chain, new franchise opening, or whatever. Product or publication announcements. These are the product announcement is one thing. A publication for you creative writers out there. Say you got a new chat book, put out a press release. Let the public know what's going on. Who knows? You might get a call for saying, "Hey, we'd like to host an event. Would you like to do a reading?" Or maybe a publisher is looking. Right. So remember, you're getting, if you, especially for those of us who don't have the training to know who to reach out to and who to communicate and connect with to get the word out, this is incredibly valuable. All right, so there's a number of different types of releases: new hires, new clients, new partnerships, rebranding, any sort of business-wide events. Hey, not everything's going to be newsworthy, but you never know. Sometimes it is. And again, keep in mind that this is the public record. I don't know how long newspapers are preserved for, but especially in the digital age, it's got a long tail of longevity. There's some longevity there. Getting my long um, metaphors mixed up. Anyway, so we've got the type of release, and that's usually just like an event announcement. It would say something like event or new product announcement or new event. Number of different things. Okay. Here's something that when I was on the job, ours were always typically in draft form. And this says, hey, this release is still in draft. It's internal. It's not meant for public viewing yet. This is, hey, to let so when you're sending this around, so you've got a press release, you're sending it to, say, your editor or your manager, and you're making sure that all the information is correct, because the information has to be correct and confirmed and verified. You do not want mixed signals. I'll save this for another broadcast, but you do not want mixed messages, mixed signals going out. This is almost like everyone's got to be on board with what's going on in the press. It's very important. I've seen it otherwise. The other nice thing is if a editor with good journalistic ethics comes across a press release that still says draft, they're going to give you a call and say, hey, this is still labeled as draft. Did you intend to send this? And make sure this is the right version, because they know that it's going to be. There's a lot of work that goes into these. Okay, so there's a couple types, right? After that, there's draft, immediate. I'll talk to you in a second. Future date. Now, future date, I was always told never to use it, because if that gets out, if you were to send, say, hey, we have an event that's happening in the future, we ask that you release this at a future date. And I was told just never to do that, because it could accidentally be published early. And, by the time that the event rolls around, and also in the public, in our case, when we were doing them, there was a certain window that you had to publish. So say like community meetings, for example, it had to be published in at least 2 periodicals within a certain amount of time. So it's really important that you have the correct date. And so we usually just hold off until they're ready to go, and that's immediate. When you've got a release labeled as immediate, it's ready to go. Okay, you could be getting a call within moments, right? If the story is significant enough, right? And contact information, organization, email, all that good stuff. Press release headline. All right. As you may expect, that headline is going to be the most important thing. It's going to be whether we got to know what, and we got to know who is involved, right? What's happening, who's involved, who are the important pieces, what are the important pieces that are the subject of this press release, right? So let's say you have a new product being launched. I might say Company X releasing product 1, 2, 3 this fall, or something like that, right? And then in the subheading down here, which should always be italicized, that is going to give you the why. Okay, new product aims at cutting back on carbon emissions in paper mills, something like that, right? Should be the why. What is the purpose? Okay, between these 2 pieces of information, that's about as much time as you have to. Okay, if I'm an editor, okay, I got to start thinking of who am I sending this to? If you got a large enough staff, like which section editor are we sending this to? Who's getting this, right? But it's also going to be like, oh, is this publishable? Is this something that we want in our publication? Is this something that we want to, talk about more in our podcast or radio show, whatever. City, state, where it's happening, month, date, when it's happening. Pretty straightforward. Um, if for whatever reason you're watching this and you want this template, shoot me an email. My name is listed in the UWGB directory. I can probably pretty easy to find. I'm happy to share this with you. And it goes all the way down. Got some information here. Body paragraphs should be very clear and concise. Okay. We One of the challenges that I have found with instructing press releases is that they're often written in the student's voice, or academic voice especially. So it's written, typically that writing is informed by years and years of writing book reports and essays and all manner of writing that really has no place in the press release. Very simple, very concise, very simple, very simple, very simple. Right? It has to be almost like, for your editors who are, I mean, essentially professional readers and critics, they got to be able to scan that as easily as possible. So very short, clear, and concise paragraphs, vital pieces of information only. Remember, and when you get good enough at these, you leave out certain details because a good reporter, a good editor is going to want to know more. Remember, the end goal is to get them, not to just send this to them and let them run with it and, oh, look, you open up the paper and there it is the next day. No, this is, you want them to return your call, get back to you. Now, at this point, you may be saying, well, who reads newspapers anyway? But keep in mind, we're also talking about digital formats. We're talking about, also building that network of connections. So maybe they don't want to, they don't have any room for you. They're not sure where this story, like you've got your self-published science fiction noir novel coming out, and they're like, we've already got a book that we're reviewing, or we're not sure what the audience is for this. They might come back to you. Maybe they want to do a feature of local authors. Hey, we got that press release. You're building those connections. So again, the idea is to get them to respond. And this is a good reason to put out press releases when, significant things are happening, because it keeps your name in the conversation. Uh, the writing style. Press releases can certainly sound robotic, right? Especially for creative writers who are used to writing with a little bit more a flourish, right? Press releases tend to be a little bit more journalistic, a little bit more objective in ambition. So you're typically writing from a third person perspective, which can also be a little bit odd or challenging for many of us because we're not used to writing about ourselves. It also makes it sound, one of the other the relevant challenges to this is that people often don't feel comfortable talking about themselves and writing about their accomplishments. Well, this is something that you do kind of have to get over, and so writing it from an objective point of view can help mitigate that, but it can also uh, make that challenge of self um, appreciation. It can also make it a little bit more like a role playing situation, right? And so you might have quotes from yourself in there. You might talk about yourself, but you're writing about it in a way that you would want yourself to be described, how would want your work to be described. Still, it should be relatively objective in tone. So you can start to see why it does take time to write. A short press release of 3 to 4 paragraphs can easily take you a day or two when you've got revisions and multiple revisions happening, right? The ultimate goal, remember I was saying that the goal is to get them to contact you, right? The press release is initiating the conversation, right? The goal is to create a dialogue. This is the initiation of that dialogue, that conversation. So it does take some time. This is why proofreading is really important. Do I sound too arrogant here? Am I not sounding? Do I not sound strong enough? Is there more information needed? These are all really important questions to have about a press release as you're going through, and you should have someone looking at this, someone in a professional capacity, an editor, if you're lucky, a friend who has good writing sense, or whoever, whatever resources you, because it's really important to get that objective opinion, because it's really hard, especially if we're writing on behalf of our own work. It's very difficult to write about, it can be difficult without a lot of practice to capture that objective third person voice that is um, that makes the has those is able to provide commentary on work without sounding as though it's um, it's the greatest thing that's ever been put on paper, that type of thing, right? All right. So the press release in that sense is initiating that conversation, but also setting the tone. You're creating that dialogue, but you're also establishing the dialogue, and by initiating it, you also are projecting a bit of control on that dialogue, and that's essentially what you want when it comes to promotions, public relations, communications, whatever. You want to be in control of that dialogue, especially in that initiation point. Okay, uh, having been on those situations where the media can contact you about something, without um, without initiating that dialogue, it's very concerning. It's like, it puts you on your heels real quick. All right, the press is powerful, all right, and so the press release is a really good tool, especially for putting that press to work. All right, not to say they're not doing enough work already. That's not the case at all. But again, you're building a partnership. The press wants to they want to broadcast that news. The press wants to hold a record of all the good things, and also some not so good things. Maybe you're running a business and um, you ran into issues or something. This is a good way of controlling that dialogue, getting a hold of that narrative before someone comes and uh, checks their own information and turns out an interpretation that doesn't quite align with the one you want out there. So it's a good way of getting ahead of things as well. But again, coming off of a fresh political event, I'm not going to go into that. All right. So that's a press release. Again, if you're interested in the template that I have, by all means. The thing about a press release too, I'm going to go back here. It's very traditional. Press releases are remarkably have not changed in formatting in a long time. For whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, but I have been told that many of these conventions come from fax days where they would just sort of spool off and you had to like quickly go through a bunch of them. I don't know if that's true or not, but regardless, I am kind of curious why the press release conventions have not changed all that much, or maybe they have, and I've just been instructing students poorly which is very much possible. Um, anyway, let's turn to less interesting things. All right, I'm gonna scooch things around here a little bit. I'm gonna try to manipulate my equipment here. Let's see what we got. All right. I'm gonna mute this or turn this off. Bring up my PlayStation here. Aim my camera down a little bit. Hopefully this won't be too jarring. All right. Yeah, this is why I gotta get my other camera from home. All right, so here is my, well, I should say it's not my original PlayStation. I had this is another one I've picked up since. But one of the things I've been wanting to do for a while is start, um, and this is sort of the digital humanities portion of this, and I want to start talking about game preservation and in the future, not in this necessarily, but also because I don't want to talk about press releases for an entire hour, even a half hour. All right, so we've got this PlayStation here. Now the challenge is, how do I connect this to my PC? Like, if I to connect it to a television, for example, if I have these connectors with my um, catches the yellow there. I have the RCA connectors for your typical PlayStation connection, right? So I've got this. This is what came with the PlayStation. The idea is, for those of you who may not remember this, or I mean, the thrill of matching red to red and white to white. Oh, but then they introduced yellow. Oh my goodness! So you've got this red to red, white to white, and you would typically plug these into the back of your television, or maybe this would go to your stereo, and this would go to your television. So you'd pull these apart so that you had this other ungodly mess happening. All right, but obviously our computer, unless you have a dedicated sound card for this, I'm not even sure if there's a card that has the RCA jack in it anymore. But we have we have all sorts of options, right? So we've got, here's one option. I've got this AV to HDMI connector. It essentially takes the signal and translates it into an HDMI. You have a couple of different options here. But it also has to be plugged in for power. Fortunately, this one has a little USB cable, right? So I'm going to try this method first. Again, I did this successfully a few days ago, but I ran into some issues. I'm hoping it was just the disk and not the machine. So to be honest, this may turn out to be nothing. So I've got my jacks in here. These are going to the PlayStation. And then this is going into the power cord, or the USB port for to connect that. All right, next. We've got cables and connectors and adapters all over the place today. So next thing, of course, is my HDMI, HDMI out, and that's going to go to, this is where it starts to get even more complicated. So it's going to go to my other video capture card. Okay, so I've got an HD in, HD out. That's going in. I'm going to plug that into my USB. So I got a couple of things happening with my USB. A couple of USB connections happening here. So again, this has got to be powered. So I'm going to scoot this over here. So I've got a couple of things happening, and so that's all connected. All right, so I'm not going to turn the power on quite yet because I want to make sure that I can do this connection properly. All right, so here I'm going to go back to the eternal windows here. So I've got Streamlabs up. All right, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up a source. Hopefully this works. In fact, before I did this with regular OBS, I can't do that. So let's try video. Let's try this. Source. See if it'll do it for me. Oh, it does. USB. That's what you want. All right. So what this is doing now is it is pulling from the video capture card, and this blue screen tells me we are in a good place. Okay. Put this behind there. So far so good. Now here's where the challenge comes in. right? I have there's not going to be any sound, first of all, because the for whatever reason that does not work. So now it becomes a problem of trial and error. I've got my controller plugged in. I've got my card. Open that up. I'm going to put in Final Fantasy 4. Got a little bit of a scratch on here. Hopefully that doesn't make too much of a mess, but we'll see. I may have to grab something else. I got a small, very, very, very small library of some of the PlayStation games I had. So I'm gonna pause here and okay, why am I spending time talking about like how to connect this? Well, one branch of digital humanities or research is the a large project, a massive project of preserving video games, right? And like film has been catching up. They've been doing remarkable work preserving old films. They've got a lot of big names, uh, big directors who are helming these projects. They're really enjoying a renaissance of, at least from my non-cinema background, it does seem like there is a wealth of investment into that range, but not so much with video games. But why in the world would that be important? Why would I care about this? Well, video games, I would argue, and I think a lot of us would argue, are a form of literature, right? They're a new form of expression, of creative expression and participatory literature that we really did not appreciate to the extent. Well, I would say most people did not appreciate. I know I did, but certainly not to the extent that I do now. Um, Dedicated a number of years studying these things, and what's really remarkable is that these games are now being reclaimed. Okay, a lot of companies are making new versions, but I love playing some of these games on PC and everything, but there's nothing. I mean, it's like a turntable. It's like a record player, right? Some when you're making music to be played on two sides of a record, it affects the composition. So when I have and this is significant for some games that we'll talk about at some point. I'm thinking of Metal Gear Solid, where you actually had to beat an enemy, you had to interact with the console itself. And it's pretty remarkable that you have this disc. We don't typically have to, don't use disc too much anymore. So this whole process, including the uncertainty whether it's actually going to work or not. So let's give it a try. Power on. All right, we are in business. Knock on wood. Oh, one of these days we're going to have the sound working and it's going to be marvelous because there was nothing about like that PlayStation sound. Now, if you can hear it, it's sort of grinding here. Can't quite hear it. It's a little. It's remarkably noisy. When you have any sort of disc media spinning around on a flimsy 30-year-old spindle, it makes quite a noise. It's remarkably quieter than it's not being picked up, but the fan in the office always gets picked up. And this is another nice thing. We're not really talking about it today, but there is something quite spectacular about the original. I mean, this is incredible technology at this point, right? You get this cinematic experience of a Final Fantasy game, And we had never seen anything like this before, not in this format. Oh, I so wish we had the sound. I wonder if I can see if I can do this somehow. I bet you I can. If this works, I'll show you what I'm doing. All right, so assuming you can hear that, that's my a Bluetooth speaker with the line in, and I don't want to disrupt anyone else. I don't know how to turn the volume down. Ooh, that's loud. So there's sound, but for whatever reason, it's just not coming through in the HDMI. So the way I did that, for anyone that's interested, taking those RCA jacks again, and I've just got this RCA to whatever you call it, 1/8" headphone jack or whatever, and I'm plopping that into the speaker. All right. But I wish there was a better way. I'll figure it out. The sound's really loud, and I don't want to bother anyone around me. So sorry for anyone who can hear me. All right, turning that off. All right, so here we have. Oh, and then we got the controller. All right, the Sony controller. I think only with the PS5 has changed so drastically, but this I love. I mean, I think this is a significant. The Sega was pretty good. Nintendo was awful. I'm sorry, but that NES controller was just horrendous. So we're starting, and you really can't play Final Fantasy without the sound. In fact, most of the games that I have are sound is important. That's why I was a little frustrated with the lack of sound input. So I got to figure that one out. But pretty cool. Anyway, so this would be. Let's say this controller is so you can see it's like yellowed and kind of sticky, gross. So here's one. I'm gonna slide this up a little bit, and so we have these. Again, what I really like about the field of game studies, especially with an eye to when we're talking about digital humanities, we're talking about the human experience as it exists in digital environments, right? So, there is an argument that games aren't really a part of this, but I would argue if given enough time to compose a good, decent argument, I would probably say it's one of the most prolific. And as far as impact goes, this it's pretty remarkable. But it's taken games long enough to be even considered an art form. So we'll take our successes where we can. So we got load, new game, memo. Here's an interesting one. Like, is this just to create notes? I've never thought about this before, but it gives you a sense of, I doubt memo is part of the current Final Fantasy IV experience. It's slot 1, slot 2, save info, save system tutorial. Oh, I've never watched this. Okay. I'm going to save this for another time because I really want the sound. Those chocobos can make some cool sounds. Okay. All right, see ya. So I'm going to wait. So we have, this is pretty cool. So now I don't have the actual original game. I have this. The other part of game scholarship is the components. So this one is kind of like a re-release of the game, right? So we've got the good old disc jewel case, right? This is compiled with Chrono Trigger, and it's got all your books in here. which is, I mean, these are great to begin with. Do games even have these anymore? I don't know. Anyway, Chrono Trigger on the other side. Right. So Final Fantasy IV. Here's where we start to, how could we start to look at this? We might look at, memos. I wonder if there's a collection of memos, if that's even possible. Like, what sort of memos did people write to? Let's see. Turn that off. So let's see. Sure what that is. Nope. So I could start a new game, slot 2. There's probably no save data. I'm sure there's not one in the slot 2 because there's no card there. Save info, save system tutorial. Oh, I wish there was sound. All right. So I'm going to go back, actually, if I can figure out how to do that. All right. So it's almost about that time. Let's see. If there's only a way to connect. I'm sure there's a way. I just got to figure out must require a splitter. But if you can see my desk, and that's even clean compared to the way it has looked the last couple days as I'm trying to sort this out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. If I can. Figure out how to go back. Maybe I do need to use the tutorial. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and hit power, do the big no-no, turn the power off there. Big in this. The other way, and I was not having a tremendous amount of success with this, but it might be a worthwhile, another way of going about this. It would work for, so we have our PlayStation connector here. And then we have this converter box here. And this is also giving us the power. So let's go ahead and try this. It's our last few minutes. I think we got some time to give it a shot. All right. So we got this little guy. I've got our power cable, and that's going to go in here. Who knows, maybe this method will give us the sound we need. So I'm going to take my HDMI cable from that converter. So I see I've got my power on. I'm going to try this. Okay. And I've got a little switch here, a little toggle between 4:3 ratio and 16:9 ratio. I'm going to slide it over to 4:3 because I believe the 1080 setting was giving me problems before. So I'm going to try this again. See if that. Nice. Also works. Oh, that even actually looks a little bit clearer too. If I toggle it, it stretches it to a widescreen. Oh, this is a much better method, I think. It also looks better. That's okay because this AV to HDMI connector is also good for other things, so I can use that. So that might be worth checking out, the visual quality of this compared, because it does look remarkably crisp. right. All right. Well, it is 1 o'clock. I would call this a success. Couple of methods for streaming I shouldn't say streaming, connecting your old console to PC computer, especially in the case of streaming. Again, I'm using Streamlabs here. It's worked with OBS as well, where I'm bringing in the device using inputting the source and presenting it here. Looks great. Oh, actually, it really looks good compared to using the RCA jacks. So, oh, this is great. Okay. Well, I'm excited. And on that note, I'm going to call it a successful experiment. So, after I got off my voting soapbox, we talked a little bit about. I'm going to turn off the camera, position it again. All right. Watch, this is going to be funky. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about voting. We talked a little bit about press releases, but more importantly, most importantly, I would say, we were able to not only successfully connect the PlayStation to the computer. We actually found a method that works best. I like it. All right. Again, the only issue seems to be the sound. Let me see if I can. Since I got you here, no one's going to boot me off. I wonder if I can. Let's see. I wonder. That's the USB. So something's coming through here, but I'm not sure. Oh, I wonder if this is. Oh, so I heard that in some cases the sound was only heard on the recording, and that might be what we're looking at here. But I wonder if I. Oh well. Okay, that's yeah, it's getting the sound, I think, but we're just. I bet if I watch the video back, it'll have it on there. And maybe that's just what we have to work with. Anyway, thanks for watching Together We Write. A little bit of a different mixed bag today. Most pieces of writing that we'll cover don't take an entire hour to talk about, and I'm also thinking about another stream where we talk some more about digital humanities, some research methods, using tools, and exploring different techniques of using them. So that'll probably be forthcoming, but I think the first thing is to square up the scheduling and the technology. I think I got the technology down right for once, although I do keep forgetting my second camera. But again, all of this is thanks to a teaching enhancement grant from CADL here at the University Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning, CADL, here at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. Most of this equipment was through them, so through their generosity. So anyway, it is a marvelous day. Fortunately, the clouds seem to be creeping in. Look, we're looking at 80 degrees. This office is boiling, so I'm getting out of here. You all have a great day. If you're watching this, I'm assuming it's not live, so whenever it is, wherever you are. I hope it's been a good one for you. Hit me up with any questions. If you have any sort of writing that you would, any techniques that you'd like me, any genres you'd like me to address, I'm pretty familiar with most of them. Creative writing, it's a little bit of a challenge, but one of these days we'll talk about the joys of editing free form poetry, maybe. Anyway, have a great one.